Good afternoon. My name is Glenn Hughes. I'm an extension forestry professor with the Mississippi State University. And I'm here to talk to you today about prescribed burning. So first of all, what is prescribed burning? Well, prescribed burning is fire that's used, first of all, in a skillful manner. And second of all, it's used under exacting or prescribed weather conditions. Third, that's used in a particular or definite place with particular fuels. And fourth, to achieve specific results. So those are the four elements of prescribed burning that are all very important. And that differs, by the way, from what we would call convenience burning, which is the thought that, well, I have a free weekend, so I think I go out to the farm and burn the back 40. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, again, prescribed burn, something that's where fire is used by skilled personnel, under prescribed weather conditions, in a particular place for particular objectives. Now across the South, you will see that the South does indeed have a longer history of historic use of fire and impact of fire on ecosystems. There's several reasons for this, but one of the reasons that you see in the slide of the United States here is that this shows the frequency of lightning strikes in the United States. And one of the things you'll note there is that from South Florida along the Gulf Coast on over to East Tennessee is the highest frequency of lightning strikes in the United States. Now certainly in Mississippi and much of the South, this is associated with precipitation, weather events where obviously fires do not get started. But there are incidences of dry lightning strikes where lightning will hit, it will ignite a natural fire, and now you have a fire. And in some cases, again, before European settlement, it would be easy to see where a lightning strike could hit, a fire gets started. In South Mississippi, for example, you have southerly winds, which are often the prevailing wind conditions in that area. And that could push a fire for 50 or 100 miles without a whole lot of problem. It jumps one or two major creeks along the way. So it is something historically has had a significant impact on our southern forests, particularly our southern pine forests. But within Mississippi even, it's important to know your part of the state. Next to the Tennessee line in Mississippi is a different set of climate conditions than you're going to run into in the southern part of the state. So know the history of your land and the use of fire in that area. And we generally see in the state of Mississippi that the southern part of the state, South Mississippi, is where we see historically the more intense use of fire, both by man and also the impact on the system naturally. There was an era in the early 1900s, it's referred to as the fire suppression era, that followed some extensive harvesting in Mississippi, cut out and get out type harvests, where phenomenal amounts of fuel were left on the ground. And it became a policy of the new government agencies at that time that were charged with wildfire suppression. And one of the policies that came out of here was the 10 a.m. policy. That was basically a Forest Service policy. And one of the things that they established here, that any fire that was larger than 10 acres should be controlled by 10 a.m. the following morning. They found that they were able to control at night or early the next morning, then they had a lot better chance of getting that under control. If it went beyond about 10 a.m. And you didn't have control of that fire, then a larger fire could result in a catastrophic event. This resulted in this fire suppression era resulted in the exclusion of fire from a lot of our southern forests, including Mississippi, and that resulted then in changes in vegetation away from the pine-dominated forests that we saw on the uplands in South Mississippi, for example, and to more of a hardwood component. So it changed the structure of the vegetation, and so that's one of the reasons that we do use prescribed burn. We'll go into greater detail. But to give you a magnitude of the problem, In 1926, in the state of Mississippi, there were 5 million acres burned that one year. Now, this contrasts to year in, year out, nowadays, there are about 58,000 acres burned statewide in Mississippi. So there's a significant reduction in the number of forest fires now compared to the 20s and the 1930s, and that obviously affected their view on fire suppression. So why do we use prescribed fire? First of all, it's what we call site preparation. If you have an area that's been cut over, you want to prepare that site, get it to where your planting crews can come in and plant tree seedlings. This is very good use for prescribed fire. It gets that site cleaned up so that the crews can come, whether they're hand planters or machine planters, the people can come through, or the machines can come through and plant that site with a minimal amount of difficulty. So site preparation is certainly one reason that we use prescribed fire. Another is hazard reduction. As was noted earlier, if you if you exclude fire and let the vegetation grow, what happens is fuel builds up and builds up, and this at some point can become a hazard. After Hurricane Katrina, for example, we're 7+ years out from Hurricane Katrina, and we've seen this problem develop in South Mississippi because a portion of the overstory was removed. The understory has responded. We now, in the absence of fire in many cases, we have a hazard. If a fire does come in there, instead of something be creeping right along the understory, it will go ahead and consume that understory, possibly get into the overstory as well. So we do have hazard situations created as a result of things such as Hurricane Katrina. So hazard reduction is a good way to stay on top of that so that we don't get into that situation. That's illustrated in a sense by the two slides that you see. The top, you can see there's a skidder that's working in a pine forest, and around the skidder is a significant amount of hardwood vegetation that has come in because that forest has been opened up. So that would be an area that would classify as a fairly high hazard. The photo right below that, by the way, is about 10 miles away from that other photograph. Same soils, but you can see that that bottom photograph has undergone regular prescribed burns, so you don't have those hazard fuels that are in the way. A fourth item is to promote herbaceous vegetation. You can burn in certain times of the year. For example, what we call a growing season burn, month of April in particular. And what this will do is in a growing season burn, you're knocking back the woody vegetation much more effectively than a dormant season burn, for example, December or January. And by knocking back that woody component, that allows you to promote the herbaceous component that's illustrated in this that lower slide there. And all the while you do these things, then you're improving wildlife habitat. In some cases, you're controlling diseases. In particular, again, in South Mississippi, you have longleaf pine down there. And longleaf pine has a stage in its life called the grass stage. And there's a disease called brown spot needle blight. And it only occurs when those seedlings are very small next to the ground. But prescribed fire can be used to come through to burn those seedlings, to burn the needles off. The needles contain the spores, and that will basically sanitize that site, and that will get rid of the fungus, get rid of the brown spot needle blight, which is a fungus. And the last, one of the last items about using prescribed fire is to stimulate fruit production, in particular things such as blueberries and related small plants that are soft mass producers. By burning them, that can stimulate the fruit production of these plants. I would note that the state of Mississippi, the legislature in the early 90s, they passed a Mississippi Prescribed Burning Act. This act recognizes the economic importance and the ecological importance of prescribed burning to the state of Mississippi and to Mississippi landowners. It sets some mechanisms in place about regulating prescribed burning under certain conditions, and also it places some limitations on prescribed burning. First of all, if you're going to do a prescribed burn and be covered by this act, you have to have a notarized burn plan. That burn plan has to be put together and notarized in advance of when you conduct that prescribed burn. And we'll go over some elements of a burn plan. The second part of the Prescribed Burning Act that's important is that you've got to have a certified burn manager on site and in charge basically of this fire. And then the third element of this act is that the burn manager needs to get a smoke permit from the Mississippi Forestry Commission. So these three elements will enable the landowner, will enable the burn manager to be protected somewhat by the Mississippi Prescribed Burning Act. Okay, so how do we burn? How do I recommend to people that they burn? Well, first of all, before you strike a match, I would encourage you to use a certified burn manager. Use someone who is certified, who has experience in burning before you just go out and to use fire on the ground. The second part of that would be to develop a burn plan. And the certified burn manager, for example, this is one of the things that they would do. A burn plan, there are a variety of documents, they have different types of burn plans, but basically what it boils down to is a description of the area and the type of conditions that you anticipate to burn under. Some of the more important elements to consider and to have in the burn plan. First of all, what are the weather conditions that you're going to burn under? And there are a couple that are very important. Probably the most important is relative humidity. Relative humidity determines how volatile that fuel is, whether it's going to sputter and really not catch fire if the humidity is too high, or whether if the humidity drops too low, then it becomes too flammable and it's very difficult to control. So there's a window, if you will, of relative humidity that's good to burn under. And in Mississippi, generally the relative humidity between 25 and 40% is kind of that window that you want to burn in. Below 25%, again, the fuels are too volatile. Above certainly about 50%, then it's very difficult to carry a burn. The burn becomes very spotty, and you're probably not going to be happy with the burn. Wind speed and direction. You do want wind to move your fire. You don't want wind in just still conditions. So you want some wind to move that fire, and depending on how you fire, it depends on the kind of winds that you want, the speed of winds that you want. So establish the wind speed that you want and the wind direction that you want this fire, that you want this wind coming from. That's important because what's downwind of you. So it's important to know that. Temperature. Temperature is probably less important than certainly the relative humidity and wind speed and direction, but temperature is important because if the ambient temperature gets too hot, then it becomes much easier for that fire to reach lethal temperatures where you can have some undesirable killing of vegetation. Besides the weather conditions, some other things to include, again, this is not the entire list of items to include in the burn plan, but what are your firing conditions? In other words, are you going to use a head fire where you start that fire and let it run through the area that's being burned? Or are you using a backfire where you're setting the fire on the downwind side and letting it just creep back against the wind, which is a lower, much safer burn, but again, different types of burns. Another thing to include on the burn plan, who are you going to notify? Who are the people to notify? Your neighbors, particularly those downwind, they absolutely need to know that you're going to be burning in case they need to leave, go to the mall or whatnot. So your neighbors need to be notified. Local fire departments, a sheriff's department, people like that, because when smoke gets in the air, people get concerned. They're going to call the fire department. They're going to call the police department. So let these folks know before you ever think about striking a match. And then there may be a host of other factors that are important as well, but again, use a certified burn manager. That person can help you walk through this burn plan. And if you are not, as a landowner, a certified burn manager, but you can get some tutelage, if you will, underneath a person who is a certified burn manager that you hire, that's probably a good strategy. Continuing with how to burn, once you've got the prescribed burn plan taken care of, now it's time to get out and begin establishing things on the ground that will allow you to put that burn in and it to be successful. One of the things is to establish your fire line. You've already covered your fire lines in your burn plan in terms of what fire lanes are going to be put in. Well, here, this is the actual mechanism where you put the fire lanes in. A lot of people, for example, in Mississippi will hire the Mississippi Forestry Commission folks to go out and to plow fire lines in. And this is best done in advance of the burning. That's one less thing you have to worry about when it comes time to burn. Second thing you want to do is arrange for all the people and the equipment the day that you're going to a burn. There's a lot of equipment that's involved, people involved, so making sure that all of those, the personnel and the equipment are available is important. And getting ready to burn, then you also need to call the Mississippi Forestry Commission, get a smoke permit so you can be covered by the legislation, and conduct once you have that smoke permit, conduct a test fire. Make sure the smoke is behaving like you anticipate, that the smoke goes up to the sufficient height and then it begins to drift where it's going to. If that smoke behaves differently, if it goes up and then comes immediately back down, then that's a problem. You don't want that. You want the smoke to go up and to be carried away by what we call transport winds. So that's where the test fire comes being important. So once you've done the test fire, go ahead and now you're ready to conduct the actual burn itself. Monitor, note the weather conditions, monitor your weather conditions continually and note this on your burn plan. Conduct your burn. Once you're done, you want to mop up, make sure that there's no active fire that's somewhere on the fringe of the property waiting for to come back, and this happens too frequently. So make sure you mop up well. And then at some point, once the burn is complete, several weeks later, a week or so later, come back and conduct a post-burn evaluation. Did things go as planned? Did we burn what we needed to do? Did we achieve the kind of burn that we needed to achieve? So always make burning a learning experience, and that's where the post-burn evaluation comes in very handy. Now let's shift to some of the limitations. There are a number of limitations on the use of prescribed burn. Probably the chief limitation that we run into is legal, and it involves not the fire itself, but it involves smoke. When it comes to prescribed burn, smoke is our greatest concern. When you light that match and you set that fire, you own that smoke. Wherever it goes, you own it. And so that's some of the smoke is the biggest concern we have, because even a hint of smoke coming on a major highway or an interstate and causing vehicles, that's caused a lot of problems for us in the past. It will continue to be a huge issue for us. So the smoke is the main concern. Certainly the fire escape, that is important, but in the grand scheme of things, it's probably secondary importance to smoke. Another limitation we've got, frankly, right now, and we're concerned about moving forward, is the number of trained personnel necessary to conduct a lot of prescribed burning on the ground. We need more fire on the ground, and so having more landowners, more foresters, natural resource professionals that work with the public, with landowners, is going to be very important for us moving forward. Another major limitation that we're running into, and it's just the society that we live in, is that we're having people that are building out into rural areas. Do everything we can to keep smoke off of away from hospitals, away from people with respiratory problems, things like that. So, but the people building up in rural areas is certainly a challenge for us. And the last limitation or challenge that we're facing is the cost of liability insurance. There have been a number of certified burn managers that have, quite frankly, stopped practicing because they cannot burn enough acres per year in order to justify the cost of the insurance. The cost of this insurance has risen considerably, so this is a problem that we're facing. So in summary about prescribed burning or prescribed fire, and I've used those terms interchangeably, but prescribed burning is a very useful tool for us in our toolbox. I would note on the economics of burning, it is still a very economical practice. That's the good news. The bad news on the economics of burning is that compared to all the other forest management practices that have been conducted, that we do conduct, it has probably increased in price more so, percentage basis, more so than any other single forest management practice. So this is a concern for those of us that do promote prescribed burning. So it is a useful tool. It is used to restore and to maintain our healthy forestry ecosystems in the South, because these systems are fire-adapted ecosystems, so the use of fire is very important. So prescribed fire is used to accomplish a number of objectives. We started out talking about the different objectives or different reasons that people use prescribed burning, and that the smoke management, when it comes down to using fire successfully, and and getting other people to accept fire, that smoke management really is going to be the critical component of fire management. Getting people to understand that just a little bit of smoke is not going to cause a whole lot of problem. When we smoke areas, highways in though, however, that is a huge problem. And last, that although we've talked about prescribed burning, wrap up here by again noting that wildlife suppression, the wildfire suppression, is still important. There are times, there are conditions that we do not need wildfire. So wildfire suppression is still important. It plays a very important role. But if you choose to use prescribed burning, go ahead and learn how to burn, use good certified burn managers, and be safe. Thank you very much, and have a great day.